Okay, coming to you live, high above Congress Street, it is the System Failure Podcast, number 17. How are we doing this week, Nate?
Hey, Brian, I'm feeling pretty good. It's a rainy day here in beautiful Portland, Maine. It's sure is dreary out. It's like that cold, it's now December, but it makes me think of that cold November rain from the Guns N' Roses. Yeah, it's a good day for podcasting, that's for sure. Not a good day to be outside.
Well, that November Rain music video is a classic. It's one of these ones where the music video is black and white, but then turns into color during the guitar solo.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever maybe seen that video. That's hilarious.
And Axl Rose or whatever is getting, married to some broad, and but I guess the idea is she catches some disease in the cold November rain and then dies.
Wow,
is what's going on with that song.
I don't think that's referenced in the lyrics. I feel like it's just someone hoping that someone else will, feel the same way they do about them. I don't think anyone died in the song, but maybe I should listen to the lyrics a little more closely.
Well, yeah, I think it's just what happens in the music video. It's just funny. They went from, Welcome to the Jungle, and then Axl Rose kind of wanted to get all creative and bring in the orchestra and stuff, and they really got away from, like, the thrashing roots of, their initial tour and whatnot.
I feel like hair metal from the 80s always has these ballads they do, though, right? I mean, there's always kind of a thing that they work in there at some point, the melancholy dirge, whereas they were doing, like, crazy thrashing hair metal. But, I don't know. Well, it's the weather certainly evokes it either way.
All right. One thing that's going on is, I've interfaced the PodTrack, the Zoom P4 here, our podcasting technology, with the computer, and I have to say it's fantastic. I mean, it's just, if you have any aspirations of, like, recording podcasts or making YouTube videos, man, this device is just fantastic. It is just so stupidly easy. And I got to throw out, the Yeti Logitech Blue thing that was sitting on my desk, that crazy USB mic that we initially recorded on, and I was still using to make YouTube videos. But holy smokes, that thing was like garbage, man. And you just don't want to be using like a USB mic. You need some kind of mixer thing. And this little device just does everything you want.
And the PodTrack P4 is a mixer. How much does it cost? And what's its specific function?
Well, it's like $170, I think, is what it costs. And with specific function, we can talk into the mic and hear each other. And we're going to be able to play audio from the computer and hear that. And so it just makes everything work. And,
coordinates a bunch of data input streams, audio input streams, does it?
Pretty much. And there's like no like lag, which is often a problem. And so this thing is brilliant. And I spent a little time interfacing and working with it. And so, this podcast is, moving into the future. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah,
it's great to be able to add functionality, capability. Someday we could possibly do remote podcasts if we can't join up. Let's suppose one of us is traveling. You won't be able to jump on live. So we could jump on digitally, and you can splice folks in via Zoom calls or whatever, eh?
That is true. Our phone calls or any way we want to do it. I think there's some foreshadowing involved there because I think we're going to be doing that soon.
Yeah, we're going to have to bring the captain on if he wants, as long as he's agreeable. Bring the captain and get his opinion, and you can all hear his voice. That will be very interesting.
Yeah, I know the much heralded and talked about. I think it'll live up to the hype once it happens.
Yeah. Speaking of my venerable high school chums, we had a couple lads in town this past weekend, and because I was hanging out with them, I went back to the drugs. So that's been a wild experience. I still feel it's Sunday afternoon now. I still feel strange and hazy, and my feels like my railroad cars are not exactly tracking on my railroad tracks. Even still, having consumed some edibles, and also we did have some mushies last night too, and it had been a long time for me since I had tried the mushies. But they didn't really, we did the strategy where you make a tea and then drink the tea that you created versus eating the mushroom body and letting it sit in your stomach. And I don't know, I feel like I could get the curtain to rise on the crazy stage, but I never really got anywhere. I think maybe a tea is out for me in the future. It's not worth, like, there's like the fun party level of mushies where you get the visual, eddies and currents overlaid over your normal visual field, and you might feel odd or strange. There's a real there's a real like a experience of death that comes at higher dosages that I think is the real instructive territory that you want to be exploring. And I just think that when you just have a tea, it comes and goes in and out of your system so fast, and it's impossible to get the dosage concentrations to where you would need to experience the ego death, the same ego death that the Greek pilgrims of Eleusis experienced and declared themselves as having been saved afterwards. Obviously, Christianity borrows that idea, being saved from the pre-Christian pagan religion that came before it, and that was centered at Eleusis, just 14 miles outside of Athens. So I felt like it was like fun, haha, but not profound. Like, it doesn't have the value from the mushies. Really comes from the profound depth journey into Dante's Inferno. In other words, the mushies follow the alchemical journey archetypical alchemical journey, in the sense that you really have to descend down into the infernal plumbing of your own subconscious in order to ascend to into the purgatorial and paradiso that lie on the outside, on the other end of the journey. So yeah, I felt like I feel like we should have dug our cleats into the batter's box and swung for the fences much more than we did. If we're going to do the drugs, we should have really gone for it. So it's not. I mean, it wasn't like a bad time, but I was almost disappointed that I didn't have a worse time, if that makes sense.
Well, so I guess my opinion about the psychedelics or whatever. Well, the thing is your body has like this rapid. Your tolerance, increases drastically, like as you're doing the drug, and like having the psychedelic response is all about kind of catching your body like off guard. And so I don't know. I feel like the wildest experiences I've ever had have been on tea. Some of the craziest experiences I've had were definitely on mushrooms that were like, from a field and like caked in cow poo.
Yeah.
And those got me good and out of my mind. The last time I did the mushies at the Captain's, I think maybe a few years ago now, but I just remember being really aware of what's going on, and it'd be like, oh yeah, this is sort of like my ego is like dying here,
yeah.
And the experience sort of just making a lot of sense, and it not being especially chaotic. But you didn't feel like that. I don't know. Your journey to like the realm of the dead.
Never made it there. I saw beautiful lights and colors. The patterns of light as they splashed across the ceilings. The ceiling of the room we were the captain's living room was delightful. I kind of experienced that sense of wonderment or renewed appreciation of the beauty of the universe, and all that's well and good. But I don't think without the horror of the Inferno, I don't think that the trip is complete at all. It's almost like inversely proportional to how much torment you go through is how much you get out of it. So I felt like it was like eating junk food, fun, but it's not nutrition of any real value.
Well, I think that's hilarious or pretty wild. I mean, you're looking for torment from the mushrooms, or but obviously, like, you don't go on a roller coaster to, you're not like looking for that merry-go-round experience. You're looking to feel like you're about to die. Yeah,
that's a good analogy. That's just what it was. It was like riding the kiddie roller coaster at the fair, like the dragon wagon versus the real roller coaster. So it has you screaming and clawing at your seat.
All right. Well, one thing that's going on this week is, Elon Musk, he allegedly retweeted some anti-Semitic remark, and it's caused a big hubbub. He's being boycotted by Disney.
Well, you've gone to the trouble, Brian, of clipping the news, and looks like you've got up here on the screen the exact tweet to which I think Elon responded. That is correct, or something in the affirmative nature. But I don't know. I glossed over this whole story because I just assumed, because everyone's an anti-Semite now, unless you have zero criticism of the Israeli government. We've talked about it, but I really enjoy this business of the woke folks who are protesting on behalf of Palestine are being now labeled as anti-Semites. It's really the whole woke thing, it's kind of self-destructive in the sense that you always have purity tests. You're looking for, you always need to have a new criminal who you're pointing out from your group. All right, well, this person needs to be exposed or canceled online for having this wrong opinion, which is what I guess happened to Elon. But I don't know. Like, I just glazed over it, assuming that the comment was unlikely to be real anti-Semitism in the Hitlerian Third Reich sense of the word, and more like anti-Semitism according to some pained and agonizing definition that someone's come up with. So what do you think here? So maybe you should read the actual tweet for us, and we can judge for ourselves.
Yeah, well, I think the tweet itself, I guess it comes across as, at least somewhat anti-Semitic. And so I guess I'll be interested to hear what you think. Although Elon's interpretation of it, or I guess what he felt like it meant to him, we'll have a clip on that in a minute. So his interpretation of it seems relatively benign, but he did kind of give an FU to the mainstream that I'm sure we'll want to talk about here. So I guess we'll read the tweet, and then we'll get into some of these clips.
All right. Hit us with a tweet, Brian.
All right. Okay, so this is the anti-Semitic tweet in question. So this guy says, okay, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit now about Western Jewish populations coming to the disturbing realization that those hordes of minorities that support flooding their country don't exactly like them too much. You want the truth said to your face, there it is. And Elon Musk replied to this tweet, you have said the actual truth.
Okay, so this tweet is saying that the Jewish communities have been pushing dialectical hatred of outgroups. Is that true? I mean, I don't. Is that?
Are we saying so? We're saying whites are an outgroup.
I'm saying that from the perspective of Jewish communities, they're making a distinction between themselves and other white people.
Well, see, I feel like what the tweeter is saying, like, I guess the idea is like that like white people are like racist and it's a problem, right? I feel like it's kind of what this guy is kind of saying is like what the establishment lefty point of view is. And that opinion is kind of coming to roost on Jewish people, after being attacked on October 7th. I mean, I think the Jewish people are being lumped in with white people as kind of being like, said to be racist by society, I guess, or something, or privileged, or something like that.
Yeah, we wouldn't when I don't think of the Jewish community as like one of the downtrodden, oppressed communities in the U.S. Like same with like the Asian population, right? Who usually are doing better for themselves. But when I think African Americans, the narrative there is that the African Americans have done socioeconomically worse here because of the echoes of slavery from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Is that like, and so that's what this tweet is saying, that that Jewish people have been complicit in racism up until now, but now they're victims of it and wanting to, like, Can you maybe read it again?
I think that's what it's saying. Yeah, so there's just sort of two parts to it. And so that first part, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. So there's that part of it. And so I think that is pretty much just what you were saying, about the outgroup and whatnot.
I guess I don't really. That doesn't seem to ring true to me. Like I don't feel like the Jewish communities are pushing a racist, or they're pushing. I don't know. I just don't really make much distinction, I guess, between Jewish folks and just regular white folks. So I don't know. Yeah, this tweet barely makes sense, right? It's like nearly impossible to parse. Is Elon sitting there like squinting his eyes, carefully trying to like, or is he just chronically online like the rest of us and just tweeting things? And how, like,
well, yeah. Elon's interpretation of it seems to be wildly different than what the actual tweet is. It's almost like a non sequitur. So maybe we'll cut to Elon's reaction.
Okay,
here.
Let's hear it.
The nature of the criticism was simply that the Jewish people have been persecuted for thousands of years. There is a natural affinity, therefore, for persecuted groups. This has led to the funding of organizations that essentially promote any persecuted group or any group with the perception of persecution. This includes radical Islamic groups. Everyone here has seen the massive demonstrations for Hamas in every major city in the West. That should be jarring. Well, a number of those organizations received funding from prominent people in the Jewish community. Right. They didn't expect that to happen. But if you generically, right, without condition, sort of fund, if you fund persecuted groups, in general, some of those persecuted groups, unfortunately, want your annihilation.
So, I mean, I guess what Elon's saying here is that, well, yeah, there's this concern about Jews because they're persecuted groups. And then I guess Jews have been funding support, or like funding Hamas somehow, or funding protests for Hamas. I'm a little unclear exactly what the claim is, but they're somehow supporting, persecuted Muslims as well. Yeah. See, it's a bit of a non sequitur, eh?
Yeah, I have no idea if any of that's true. It does seem like there's the thing you brought up a couple of weeks ago where Bibi Netanyahu was specifically talking about supporting Hamas in order to scuttle any shot the Palestinians might have at brokering a two-state deal that is appealing to them. So there's like Jewish groups supporting Hamas in that sense because they benefit from the conflict, and they don't. There's interested parties on both sides of the conflict who are, what they're interested in is not having the conflict come to an end. So that part makes sense. But yeah, this is just like, I mean, I think about the Martin Luther King speech where you're supposed to judge people, on the merits of their character and not on the color of their skin. Like infinitely parsing who belongs to what group and who funded what opinion and what skin color it just seems like such a waste of time. It's like just the sort of conversational cul-de-sac that that our elites would like us to be going around and round and round in like a whirlpool, because then no one will focus on the people who are actually stealing everything in the society that's not nailed down. So that's my initial reaction, and so but I think you have another clip now where it's like some advertisers were unhappy and pulled out of ad spends on Twitter because of this, or did that really happen? Or is that something that was made up by Media Matters trying to make it seem like this? Is this all like a fabrication of the 24-hour news cycle? Like, what else have you got for the next clip?
Yeah, well, he is being protested by ABC and Disney. Well, I just want to say about the clip that, I mean, I think what he's saying is that, like, broadly speaking, like Jews are persecuted people and Hamas is a persecuted people. And then just so like concern for persecuted peoples, in that narrative, I guess, broadly speaking, is backfiring on the Jews because people are also concerned about, the people in Israel or Hamas, or the Palestinians being killed. But it is just a crazy, like the second part of the tweet, I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit now about Western Jewish populations coming to the disturbing realization that those hordes of minorities that support flooding their country don't exactly like them too much. It just seems like Elon was more interested in the second part. I mean, suffice to say, it's like a misnomer. Or it's not a misnomer, but he says that he made a mistake here. Like he retweets lots of things, and occasionally he's going to make a bad retweet. That's just the way it goes in the nature of the platform. And this is probably his worst tweet, is what he said. And so with regards to being boycotted by, Disney and whatnot, I guess there's sort of two clips on this. Well, let's just start with the big one that was making the headlines here. So here it is.
What was that trip like? And obviously, that there's a public perception that, and you're clarifying this now, but there's a public perception that was part of a apology tour, if you will. That this had been said online, There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger
I hope
today.
they stop.
You hope
Don't advertise.
you don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself.
But
Go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is.
So he's saying, you know, an FU in particular to Bob Iger of Disney.
Right. Yeah. Well, of course, because Disney owns ABC, and ABC News, no one is watching anymore. But I think what's happened, the context here is that this time around in 2024, the party, the ruling regime, won't be able to count on Twitter to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story or whatever the equivalent turns out to be this time around. Right. So there's definitely been a loss of control, and advertising dollars is one way that you control what gets on TV and what doesn't get on TV. So it makes perfect sense that the mouse would be trying to would be doing anything they can to try to bring Twitter back under control of the ruling regime. So that is, and it's hilarious that Elon is telling him that your money is not going to get you a say in what it does or doesn't go on Twitter. That's this whole. Is that your interpretation as well? That's his whole point. He bought this platform trying to be as much of a free speech absolutist as possible, and that doesn't sit well with the folks in power who now need to control a narrative as wealth inequality spirals even further out of control.
I mean, I think that the free speech needs to be like allowed to happen. So, you know, Elon Musk goes out here, you know, he bungles a retweet. And obviously, the interpretation in his brain is like different than what's on the tweet, as we talked about there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that means that, you know, your platform should be dissolved. Yeah.
So, like people who run platforms who are who do what like with the intelligence agencies and the State Department and whatever other federal entities reach out to them, the media outlets who play ball, they're all trying to delegitimize the alternative outlets, which now Twitter is one. Trying to demonize that. Usually they call it an alt-right space, or there's unacceptable opinions, or it has to be shut. This is just an outrage that Elon has tweeted this. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel like this is why I glazed over it. I was like, who knows what the tweet actually said, and who knows, you know. But I don't think that Elon would tweet something anti-Semitic. If the man harbored a grudge against the Jewish race, right, he probably would be a lot more careful about what he retweeted online, right? It's like, I don't know. Yeah, if you're chronically online and tweeting all the time, I could see how you could run afoul of especially a complex and like a very it's hard. It's a difficult tweet to parse. Whatever the one he supposedly endorsed here. I don't know. I see everything from the context of this ultra rich getting richer while things get worse for everyone else, and I think that this is just another part of the a part of a fight over the public narrative. I'm sure you probably would agree, eh?
Yeah, well, there's just a big hubbub about this retweet, and then, you know, there's a lot of hubbub about Elon Musk telling Bob Iger to F off. And yeah, I mean, it's like a problem for the establishment that this non-state controlled social media platform is out there. And yeah, I mean, the next time there's a Hunter Biden laptop story, you know, it's not going to be suppressed. And so, I mean, I think it's an issue. I guess I'll just play like one more clip here. And so this is like the part that they like aren't playing or talking about. And Elon Musk kind of brings the point home here. So here it goes.
I mean, if the company fails because of an advertiser boycott, it will fail because of an advertiser boycott. And that will be what bankrupted the company, and that's what everybody on Earth will know.
What do you think then of the? This goes back to the idea of trust, though.
Then it'll be gone, and it'll be gone because of an advertiser boycott.
But you recognize that some of those people are going to say that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform, and I just wonder and ask you and think about that for a second.
Tell it to the judge.
But the judge is going to be
the judge is the public.
And you think that the public is going to say that Disney is making a mistake?
Yes.
And they're going to boycott Disney?
There already are.
Well, there are some that are for lots of different reasons, but you think that this is going to, that you have the, this goes to actually the interesting of power and leverage.
Let the chips fall where they may.
So, I mean, I guess I think it's awesome because everyone knows that the establishment has lost all credibility.
Yeah.
I mean, so Elon's saying that, I mean, the company is going to collapse without the support of advertisers, but just everyone knows that the establishment's a failure. And I don't know. I guess I just thought it was cathartic because that's just how I feel.
Yeah. So do you think that Twitter will actually collapse as a result of massive advertising pullout? I feel like this has to be overblown. He wouldn't be so sanguine. Elon wouldn't be so sanguine about the demolition of Twitter and the immolation of his $44 billion if he actually believed that might happen, right?
Yeah, well, I guess he thinks that the power just isn't really with the establishment. So I guess one way or another, he thinks he can make it through, I'm sure is the case. And he's like banking on, well, the reality of the situation rather than like the hyper normalization going on about like the state of affairs in which we reside.
Yeah. Okay, I see your point. So Elon seems sanguine that people will see through the layer of hyper normalization, and that he doesn't really believe Twitter's going to fail, but whether he does or doesn't, he definitely believes the emperor has no clothes, in other words, and that enough people, there's a critical mass out there who might realize it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and it does seem like with the acquisition of Twitter and the enforcement of something close to free speech on that platform. And the labeling of the pro-Palestinian protesters as anti-Semites, it does feel like we're approaching the end of the old discourse. Like to what you're saying, like the status quo that you would believe is in place if you listen to NPR or Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. I agree. I think that a lot fewer people are believing that. It feels like the clock really is ticking on that old worldview, that it's finally dying here in maybe good time for the 2024 election or maybe beyond. But to me, it certainly, well, like we go back to the 2016 election of the Donald. Like for me, that was like 2016 was a key moment for me. I had been politically during my college years, during my 20s, I had just been I would just listen to Bill Maher, and I would just assume that if we could just get rid of the George Bush multiple wars in the Middle East regime, then everything would be great. And I was excited about the arrival of Barack Obama. I remember his election was exciting in 2008. And then I had, from 2008 to 2016, I went through a period of disillusionment with realizing that Obama was just the bank's man through and through, that no meaningful reform or change would be coming as a result of the 2008 financial crisis. And furthermore, I found that I was paying $1,200 a month in student loan debt that made life absolutely unbearable, from like 25 to 35 every month, $1,200. It was absolutely untenable. And so for me, I really enjoyed Bernie Sanders' 2016 candidacy, and seeing his candidacy in the primaries scuttled by the Democratic machine really showed me who was really showed that the Democrats are just they're just a part of a sock puppet show, the same sock puppet show, and that there would be no relief coming from within the two-party paradigm. Yeah,
well, we found out which side their bread was buttered on.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And we had to endure the COVID election of 2020. In which it felt so for me when the Bernie was not able to get through the morass of the Democratic primaries, but the Donald was able to get through the morass of the Republican primaries. He'll just call people names. The dude doesn't care at all, and it was really gratifying to see at least the right flank of the machine take such damage at the hands of the Donald, and the news media did the same thing. I recall listening to my NPR, which I listened to like every day for decades. I recall listening to NPR and having them report on the fact that the Donald was an agent of Moscow. And I remember this was like the week after the election in November of 2016. I remember thinking, if NPR is reporting it, maybe it's really true. But then the weeks and months wore on, and it just became a laughingstock. The Mueller investigation came and went, and it was a laughingstock. And everyone knows that that was just that was just a conspiracy theory drummed up by the mainstream media sources, and that they with that display they discredited themselves with a lot of Americans, I think, but not enough to not so that Americans weren't willing to play ball in the COVID year of 2020 with the election of Joe Biden. And so for all of the, I couldn't vote for the Donald in 2016. I think I voted for the Catley, Jill Stein, the third party. But the recognition on the Republican side that something is wrong with the establishment and that we can't stand the establishment anymore was so liberating and exciting, in inverse proportion to how disappointing it was to have the establishment crammed back down our throats in 2020.
Yeah, well, I mean, the election of the Donald obviously represents like what Elon here is saying is that there's a truth that everybody knows, but the establishment's trying to push away, and that's what a hypernormalization is.
Yeah, yep, yeah. They're trying to push a fake version of reality where nothing's wrong and where they haven't completely handed this country to a handful of wealthy billionaires, and we just want to keep marching along, and that hasn't happened, and it's just becoming impossible. So this all leads to me to this sense. I think a lot of people would identify with it. This sense of history being dammed up, or like as in there are people who are so financially interested in the status quo that they want to preserve it at all costs, even though we desperately need a change in the way we do business. And that desperation mounts with each passing year. Suicide rates are up. Deaths of despair are up. Childbearing is down. I mean, it's like the problem is right there flashing for everyone, for us all to confront. And it's just it's very frustrating to feel like the people in power are trying to prevent change. They're trying to dam up the river, but of course, the longer you dam up the river, the more the pressure builds behind the dam. And so I really wonder. Like for me, the pressure built up by 2016 just intolerably behind the dam, and I just can't believe we're here 8 years later. Hearing these Elon Musk clips and litigating and relitigating this whole thing, which is really just about a loss of control. Like the old Bob Iger's old school media is losing complete control of the narrative, and the media, the power structures that back him are losing control of the discourse. And I wish it would happen much faster, sooner rather than later. But dams always break suddenly, right? They don't gradually go. They let go all at once.
Well, I mean, I think this microcosm just sort of shows you like why the dams happen, or like, I mean, the establishment's not gonna. I mean, they're not gonna just let Bernie Sanders win the primary, right?
Yeah.
And so, just forces have to build until something breaks, and I mean, that seems to be just what we're going through.
My lovely fiance Tracy and I have noticed a lot of RFK flags in Cape Elizabeth, which is Cape Elizabeth is one of the wealthier zip codes in Maine. A lot of money down there on the coast, and so it's interesting to see the RFK bumper stickers and yard signs and flags flying. There was one person on our commonly driven route who had one, and now we're up to like 3, I think. So I don't know. Maybe I'm hopeful that RFK's doing what Bernie didn't dare to do, which is abandoning the Democratic Party. Maybe, that will be the thing that finally bursts the levee, bursts this massive putrid zit that's building up. Or maybe we're going to have to wait 4 more years and 4 more years. Man, yeah, it sure feels like feels like the people who were previously in control of the narrative, a.k.a. Bob Iger, are becoming more desperate in their actions and more flagrant in how they're trying to trying to keep their death grip on the ability to tell people what to think.
Well, it's certainly a perfect storm for an independent candidate, right? Nobody likes Biden, and, well, nobody likes the Donald either. I mean, I think largely people would rather not have the Donald, but they just can't vote for like the establishment.
Yeah, that's definitely where I fall.
Yeah, and so now you've got RFK running, who has the Kennedy name, And I mean, if you see, I think being like an anti-vaxxer, I'm holding up quote marks here, would be like a bigger deal, except this COVID thing was like a complete sham, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you have an actual independent social media source that's like, in the top 2 or 3, if not the top, like social media platform in the world. Yeah, I just don't know like what the establishment's going to do here. But I would imagine it's going to be something shocking.
I do feel like the Jeffrey Epstein jigsaw puzzle piece fits in here because, like, what we should be, what the takeaway from this Elon Musk thing for me is noticing how interested the media is in an errant tweet of Elon's versus how uninterested they are in the client list of Jeffrey Epstein, or how uninterested they are in covering the campaign of the aforementioned, RFK Jr. So that's the real noticing how incandescent the discussion is over something that's that's like a non sequitur, like this Elon Musk business. Really, man, it really the contrast and interest between that and Jeffrey Epstein is hilarious to notice. And I think that Jeffrey Epstein, as mentioned, has been done severe damage to the credibility of the mainstream media. Their total lack of interest in that subject is highly suspicious.
Well, the whole Epstein business sure is a shocking scandal. It's, I mean, the QAnon people are like crazy Trump supporters, but like their primary claim about, our politicians being pedophiles, like completely vindicated.
Yeah. I can't believe every hierarchy at the top has people diddling children. I just can't believe it. Sports, religion, politics, entertainment. I mean, it is. I really can't believe it's this prevalent. I just can't believe it. It's so wild.
Hopefully, somehow the Epstein scandal can come back into the light, because obviously Elon, didn't own Twitter whenever that went down.
Yeah.
Although, did he own Twitter when Ghislaine Maxwell was being prosecuted? I guess I'm unclear, but that just didn't really have the traction. It was just crazy when, Epstein being in prison and then getting, Epsteined, it's now a verb, and getting killed in some dubious fashion, like all the cameras just being off, and like the autopsy report showing that he was like, I guess that he couldn't have hanged himself, that he was like actually strangled.
Yeah, what's the bone in your neck? If you strangle yourself, all the damage is up underneath your jaw, right? Obviously, you're hanging from a thing.
Yeah.
But if someone creeps up behind you and strangles you, what is the name? There's a bone in your neck they always shatter because they're grabbing you more around the center or base of your neck. Yeah, versus the hanging from which is going to be right up underneath the base of your skull. It is absolutely the list of coincidences that had to happen for Epstein. I remember when he got arrested, and there was a bunch of hilarious jokes online about, well, he's not long for this world. There's no way he's going to survive long in prison, given his client list and what he could possibly blow the whistle on. And sure enough, it was like, I remember we went to the beach. It was like the summertime, and I pulled up. I was rolled over on the beach on my phone, pulled up Wall Street Journal, Epstein dead in prison. And you're like, wow, it's exactly what everyone was joking was going to happen has actually happened. And they had to whack the dude like full view of everyone, and then get their buddies down at the editing desk at Wall Street Journal and our other venerable papers to like just not talk about it much after that. And it definitely when you were going through the Elon Musk, tweets and quotes, I always keep in mind this orientation, like the way that my fundamental axes of navigation here are, okay, well, the rich are stealing everything from the rest of us, like the ultra wealthy are stealing everything from the rest of us. And so, yeah, it's interesting how Epstein's super exclusive client list of ultra wealthy people and powerful people, it's interesting how, I wonder just how much that fits into the broader picture of a massive class war that's going on in the background. I feel like it's integral. Like, I feel like you can just feel like it's right over the target given how much heat and how much the mainstream media wants to ignore it and just keep walking and not have to acknowledge that happened. And Ghislaine's connections to the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, the connections of her dad to the Mossad are also vastly interesting in light of what's been happening since October the 7th over there in the Middle East. So I don't know. It's really strange. It does feel like another major blow to the death grip that Bob Iger and his stodgy contemporaries have on the national discourse.
Well, I mean, it sure was a shocking scandal. it's just sad. I mean, like everyone on like our conspiracy was talking about Epstein, and anyone who is just vaguely interested in conspiracy theories like knew the name. And now it's happened and it's over, and I guess it's just not as interesting anymore. But I guess there's plenty of other things going on, and while the establishment nonetheless is still like losing its credibility. And yeah, man, I think we're really in for it in the next year here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting 2024. Now that the narrative we're all supposed to believe in has just degraded to beyond the point of caricature. It's been 4 more years of degradation on that front. And so we are in for one hell of a 13 months now. It's now, the calendar's ticked over into December. So I guess that gives us 11. I should be subtracting versus adding, but 11 months to the upcoming U.S. election. And we'll see if the wave can finally break by then. I really hope that it does. I think a lot of people, because history is dammed up, they are at a place of stasis in their own lives. A lot of people waiting to have kids, waiting to buy a house, waiting to move up into, waiting for their lives to unfold the way that it's supposed to, but has been prevented from unfolding by the machinations of high finance. Warned about in the Bible. It sure is fascinating to see some of those darker biblical prophecies about finance come true before our very eyes.
Well, we've all been under a spell, basically, and the spell is breaking.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, who knows what's going to be on the other side of that. The spell seems like it's definitely going to break. The bubble's going to pop. I mean, if nothing else, I mean, AI is like just definitely going to do it at some point here. So, yeah.
Do you think a lot of people share this sense of impending climax, Brian? Or do you think that this sense of impending climax is something that the media or social media dispenses, or that it reinforces? I wonder, I mean, am I just falling for a sense of urgency that's not really there? Does, in other words, the way that social media work, or the way that the desperation of the mainstream media, does that lend to a sense of climax that isn't really there? Or do you really think, do you think it's broadly understood that that the zit is getting close to bursting?
Well, I think people come in a couple different flavors. You've got like, like your boomer who's heavily financially invested in the system and doesn't want to see any change happen. You've got your person who is driven crazy by the Donald, and just anything that sounds like it might be alt-right, they just avoid. And then I think you have your average poor millennial who, unfortunately, none of us own homes, so none of us are invested in the system. And so I think there's a lot of people like that who are, of a similar mind as yourself there. So, they should have got us more financially invested in the system.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap between person number 2, the person who has the Donald derangement syndrome, and then person number 3, the disaffected millennial. But I feel like that Venn diagram is shrinking now that everyone in category 2 has been called a bigot by for being pro-Palestine by the establishment that was supposed to represent them. Like the establishment that opposed the Donald is calling them anti-Semitic for daring to protest. You know that meme where it has like an anime dude and he's got a butterfly about to land on his finger, and it's always like, is this X, Y, or Z? Right. And so that's how I feel when I see the protesters out in Longfellow Square here in Portland, banging on with their pro-Palestinian slogans. I'm like, I feel like, is this anti-Semitism? Probably not. Probably those folks are, every one of them, bleeding hearts all, and they just recognize that there's an imbalance of power being projected on the Palestinian people. So yeah, I really think that everyone in category 2 being called a bigot by the DNC establishment is a major development forward. So that excites me. That excites me because that really breaks up the logjam. That really accelerates the breaking up of the logjam that we so desperately need to unwind.
I mean, I think that's part of why it's happening. It's this perfect tactical wedge by like these anti-establishment forces. I mean, it probably, like, Russia and Iran, there's this front in the Ukraine, and now there's this front in Israel, and it's part of this. Well, I mean, the establishment's just falling apart under its own weight, as Marx predicted.
Yeah. Man.
So I think what it all means is, we need to get our Fife Corps together, and we'll get the flag and march up and down the square there.
Get some drums.
And The revolution is at hand.
Interesting. Well, what do you think? Does that conclude the exciting system failure podcast for this week?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for this week. Do want to mention to people, send us an email. Let us know why our opinions are misguided and unhinged. Send us a note to at nop@substack.com. And in the next week or two, I should have an exciting Substack essay coming out on Substack at nop.substack.com on the exciting subject of the alchemical journey, one of the important, I think, critically important ideas as we head into this period of instability. And so, anyway, look for that. Join us online, and we hope to see you all there.
Alrighty.